March 20th, 1952, Oscar night. Hollywood is stunned when an MGM musical defeats a host of powerhouse dramas to win Best Picture, along with 5 other Academy Awards.
An American in Paris.
Like the Gershwin music that inspired it, An American in Paris daringly blended high and low art forms to create a joyous celebration of painting and dance.
You can see the élan and the passion for the work.
But its fusion of French Impressionism, ballet, and Tin Pan Alley could only be achieved by testing the talents of a visionary team, led by producer Arthur Freed, star and choreographer Gene Kelly, and director Vincente Minnelli. Together, they defied formula and industry skeptics to create what may be the culminating work of MGM's Freed unit, one that lifted the movie musical to new artistic heights.
The film opened up new vistas not only technically and artistically, but required a different kind of courage, taking a chance.
Our hearts were in our mouth. It was very daring in those days to do it.
An American in Paris could never be made by other people, they wouldn't think of it.
Here was a musical where everybody was galvanized to the 10th power.
Arthur Freed headed his own production unit at MGM, making musicals, and he was considered, and I think is still considered, the greatest maker of musicals in the history of film. He was himself a songwriter, a lyricist, and he and Ira Gershwin were friends, and they used to shoot pool together at Ira's house in Beverly Hills. And he'd been thinking about An American in Paris, and he asked him for the use of that title, and Ira said, you can use it, but so long as there's nothing but Gershwin songs in that picture. And Freed said, that's the general idea. So they went ahead and did it.
A producer of sophisticated taste and the son of an art dealer, Freed envisioned a film combining 2 of his passions, the art of the French Impressionists and the music of the late George Gershwin, who in a brief life of 38 years had redefined American music on Broadway, in Hollywood, and in the concert hall.
Gershwin is the one great figure out of Tin Pan Alley who wrote terrific popular songs that everybody knows for Broadway shows and reviews, and he also wrote serious pieces for symphony orchestras and jazz orchestras.
Gershwin had studied painting in Paris, and he wrote the suite, An American in Paris, about himself. It's a magnificent piece of work.
By 1949, Arthur Freed had produced 2 composer biopics at MGM, the Jerome Kern Profile, Till the Clouds Roll By, and the Rodgers and Hart-inspired Words and Music. But for his Gershwin Dream Project, the 55-year-old Freed chose a less formulaic approach, especially since Gershwin's life had already been dramatized in the 1945 film Rhapsody in Blue, starring Robert Alda.
Diminished none. If I had your talent, I'd be a pretty obnoxious fella. What do you call yourself?
George Gershwin, it's my real name.
Mine's Oscar Levant. I'm thinking of changing it.
They decided to use the Gershwin catalog, not to tell the story of Gershwin, which had sort of been done in Rhapsody in Blue, but to create a new story around it.
This is Paris, and I'm an American who lives here.
Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly were both under consideration for that picture. Gene was trained in ballet, and he was really well suited to advancing story caused through dance.
It was almost a dream come true for Gene to do this project, because you've got a Gershwin who was trying to create a particularly American style of sound, and you've got a Gene Kelly who was trying to create a particularly American style of dance, and those 2 come together on this project.
By the time he officially signed on in June of 1950, 38-year-old Gene Kelly had emerged as a triple threat: dancer, choreographer, and director. Within the Freed unit, he had found a team of collaborators who shared his goal to advance the art of the movie musical.
The word that he used was repertory. He thought it was much more of a repertory company. And it was something that you don't have anymore. And basically, on the lot, you had all of the best in the business.
With Kelly on board to both star and choreograph, Freed knew exactly who to put in the director's chair.
Freed then turned to Vincent Minnelli again to direct the film because Minnelli, with his vision for this particular film, was perfect.
God gave Vincent and I, from Cabin in the Sky on, and Meet Me in St. Louis and The Pirate and Ziegfeld Follies, he had an eye. And he found French painting an inspiration for his own style. So here was a piece too that fitted him like a glove, as it did Kelly.
Nowadays, it's very popular to think of reality and fantasy in conjunction with each other, and what is reality and what is fantasy. It's what novelists have always used. I've always leaned toward that, and I've wanted to do it more than they allowed me to.
Together, Minnelli and Freed faced the next challenge: how to seamlessly integrate Gershwin's songs, written in the 1920s and 30s, into an original story. To pull it off, Freed turned to a rising wordsmith from Broadway, 31-year-old Alan J. Lerner.
Alan J. Lerner had been a lyricist and a librettist and had worked with, very successfully, Frederick Loewe, Paint Your Wagon and Brigadoon, and had been brought to the Freed unit to do Royal Wedding.
Tra la 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 la, tra
Once
la,
company,
la,
two's a crowd. You get it?
Lerner shaped his story around two bohemian artists, Jerry Mulligan, played by Kelly, and his friend Adam Cook, a brilliant but neurotic pianist. The role of Adam was tailor-made for a close friend of Freed's and George Gershwin's, the brilliant but neurotic Oscar Levant.
It's not a pretty face, I grant you. But underneath its flabby exterior is an enormous lack of character.
Levant idolized Gershwin. He helped to introduce the Rhapsody in Blue. He made one of the defining recordings of that and of the Concerto in F in the 1940s. He never really fulfilled his promise as a composer. He wrote one hit song.
I understand you compose, too.
If it wasn't for Gershwin, I could have been a pretty good mediocre composer.
But he also represents this kind of strange at-sea neurosis, which is also written into the whole concept of the plot, which is that they're all kind of lost. They're all looking for careers.
I'm beginning to feel like the world's oldest child prodigy.
Oscar Levant was, Gene said, he was a very, very, very difficult person. He also said he was very eccentric, and he also said he was brilliant.
Gene and Oscar Levant disagreed about what the song by Strauss should sound like. Their difference was, it's a Viennese waltz, and Viennese waltzes played in Vienna have certain hesitations.
Old Vienna! Ah, Franz Josef!
Gene didn't want the hesitations. They're in Paris, after all, not Vienna. Well, Oscar and Gene got into a terrible argument about this.
My God!
Oh! Gene was really mad, and Oscar left. The best part of the story is they both came back the next day as though nothing had happened.
Mein Herr! Mein Herr! Bitte, bitte! Danke, danke! Auf Wiedersehen!
There are many accounts about the casting of the role for Henri Bourrel. The person who was actually originally intended for the role was Maurice Chevalier.
But this was a very sensitive point, Chevalier. Chevalier, during the war, entertained for the Vichy government, and he was kind of a persona non grata.
Gene said flatly that he turned us down. Gene and Chevalier were very good friends, and Gene wrote absolutely that it was Chevalier who turned that role down.
And then it was Lerner who had been in New York and saw this extraordinary talent, Georges Goutheret.
Oh, no, no, that's not me. I am not that young. Let's just say I am old enough to know what to do with my young feelings.
The interesting thing is that he was born in 1915, so he was actually 2.5 years younger than Gene. So they would gray his hair and tried to make him look a little bit older.
Oh, that's nice work if you can get it. And if you get it, dites-moi, won't you tell me how?
I've never seen so many Americans in Paris before. The Champs-Élysées looks just like Main Street.
I had just had a success in some Shakespeare on Broadway, and this came after, seemed a perfect juxtaposition.
How'd you come by all these worldly possessions? A rich husband or a rich father?
Father.
Huh? What's he do?
Oil.
I should have known.
Suntan oil.
I chose to do a little of the Doris Duke thing, you know, that character who had this strong father and was alone with a terrible lot of money. And it's a hard place to be, because when you have a lot of money or a lot of fame, you don't know whether they like you or what you are. So finally, you become hurt often enough, you develop a shell.
I don't need a paid escort. And I'm not trying to rob you of your precious male initiative. I'm simply interested in your work, and I want to get to know you better.
I decided that she was scared to death of him, that she was scared to death of men. And if you look and you see the way I worked with my body, although I seem to be flirting with him, I'm covering myself all the time.
This sponsor of yours, what does she want from you in return? Don't tell me, I shock easily.
Censors didn't want any type of illicit relationship between Nina Foch's character and Jean's character, between Milo and Jerry. And once they were assured that there wouldn't be any hint of impropriety, then they gave it the label, stamped it with the approval that it was not morally objectionable for adults.
Oh, Jerry, I'm so glad.
Jean said the biggest struggle that he had with the studio was in convincing them to use a French girl.
Incidentally, who's Lise?
Sid Charisse was suggested. Gene didn't want Sid Charisse. He wanted a new person.
He actually went to Paris to shoot the tests of two people he thought would be suitable. 2 years before, he had seen a ballet by David Luchine in Paris called Encounter, or Oedipus and the Sphinx. And this young girl who was 16, named Leslie Caron, played the Sphinx.
I got this phone call, Gene Kelly's coming to Paris, he'd like to meet you. I had never seen Gene Kelly. I'm afraid to say I hadn't even heard of him, because there wasn't all that much, contact with America since the beginning of the war. I went to be polite, and he was very charming, very respectful. And he said, I'd like to make a test. Okay, why not? So we made the test, and I absolutely forgot about it, because all I wanted was to be a classical ballet dancer. Then suddenly there was a phone call. They've picked up your option. They want you in Hollywood to make the film in 3 days. I really was upside down for 3 days. The trip took about 30 hours. And I think after 30 hours, you're just a zombie. I was underage, so I had to have my mother. And we were taken to Restaurant La Rue by my new agent. And there I saw Gregory Peck. And I had the hugest, the biggest steak that I ever saw in my life. And I couldn't eat it, of course. My stomach was quite shrunk. I'd gone through the war. And going through the war meant malnutrition and getting thinner and thinner.
Milo, what a pleasant surprise. Jack, say hello to Milo.
Hello, Milo.
Hello, Jack.
I had anemia when I arrived, but Jean defended me and said, listen, let's make it much lighter. So I was one day in bed, one day shooting.
You started out without your nerve, monsieur.
Now, don't get angry. This was perfectly harmless. I haven't been able to take my eyes off you since I walked into this smoke factory.
I knew nothing. I knew absolutely nothing. I didn't know what a camera looked like. I didn't know how to speak lines. I didn't know how to speak English. So as far as I can judge, my performance is just one huge question mark. What am I doing here?
Jean certainly looked at Leslie as a kind of protege. She actually turned 19 during the production. Jean was 38, which obviously is a span. But I think he felt very protective of her and wanted to see that she was okay.
Honey, believe me, I'm no enemy.
He called me Lester the Pester. Because it rhymed, but he really was you know, he loved me a lot. Gene was my guide. Vincent wasn't a very communicative person. I absolutely adored him. He called me Angel, and that was enough. But Gene was like Big Brother. One day I came late. I didn't have a watch. I mean, you know, in the war, there was nothing. There wasn't even Kleenex. There wasn't soap. So I came late, and he said, "Leslie, you're late." And I said, sorry. And he said, "Don't you have an alarm clock to wake you up in the morning?" "No." And that's when he said, "Well, you know, kid, the war is over. You can buy one in any drugstore." And I thought, wow, what a revelation. It's a whole new world.
Hey, Marie, comment vas-tu aujourd'hui?
Ah, bonjour, chérie, ça va bien?
Mon coup de touriste aujourd'hui, Marie?
Kelly and his collaborators had hoped to shoot at least some of the film in Paris. But by the time cameras rolled on August 1st, 1950, France had been relocated to the MGM backlot.
The original idea was to shoot the ballet in Paris, much as they had done on the town, sneaking shots kind of behind the scenes.
Fried convinced them, said, look, why give us, you know, Paris as it is? Let's do Paris as the Impressionists saw Paris. Let's rebuild that.
Gene said that that was ultimately very fortunate, that the freedom that they had in creating these sets on the stages and on the backlot gave them a lot more freedom than they would have had stealing shots in the city.
When you start with Preston Ames, who was probably the greatest art director that MGM had. You see, Preston studied in Paris, so Preston was able to do great work because he knew exactly what a French street would look like.
Fried also put his faith in a trio of musicians who carefully adapted Gershwin's melodies and harmonies, orchestrator Conrad Salinger, and musical directors Saul Chaplin and Johnny Green.
You've got John Green, the head of the music department. A very successful songwriter in his early years. He wrote Body and Soul, I Covered the Waterfront. He was the head of the music department.
Green expanded MGM's orchestra from 50 players to 72 for the film and rechristened the group the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Symphony Orchestra.
Johnny Green had the best musicians that were not only in Hollywood, but probably that were in the United States at the time. The string section and the woodwinds sounded incredible. And Johnny's swung. I mean, it was a swinging kind of sound.
He was a brilliant guy, but a lot of the work he sort of delegated to Saul Chaplin, one of the nicest people in the business.
As far as I'm concerned, Gershwin is the 20th century American composer. I loved everything he wrote. Now here I'm doing his music. I kept thinking all the time, am I doing right by Gershwin?
And then you have this fascinating figure who really is sort of an unknown hero in the history of the musical, Conrad Salinger. He was classically trained, but with John Green, they created this sound that had the richness, the complete instrumental palette of a symphony orchestra, but with a lot of razzle-dazzle. And they're working with this unbelievable catalog.
Alors maintenant, une chanson américaine. An American song.
Gene always looked for opportunities to work with children.
I got. Tous ensemble. Boom.
And in this case, he brought in as many of the French immigrant kids as he could find.
I got.
Rhythm.
I got.
Music.
I got.
My gal, who could ask for anything more?
I'm Andree Guy.
And I'm Claude Guy.
And we were in American in Paris.
We were two of the kids in the I Got Rhythm number.
Ask for anything more. Old man trouble.
Gene Kelly wanted children that weren't professional. And
well, that pretty well fit us because we weren't really actors, we were extras. And we were a little bit shy and we had a little bit of a broken English.
I got.
Music.
I got.
My gal, who could ask for anything more? Who could ask for anything more?
Gene Kelly was terrific. He was so nice to the kids, and he loved playing with us, even off the set. You know, he would tap dance around us, and he would give us candy.
It was like sunshine when he came into the studio. Right. I don't think I've ever in my life seen another personality like that.
I Got Rhythm stood out for Gene. When he looked at it again, he said, "That's a charming number."
There's a tremendous sense of satisfaction when Kelly's doing I Got Rhythm.
Who could ask for anything more?
These are not difficult steps, but that's not what it's about. It's not about the step. It's about taking the technique and applying it to the right song with the right time and the right arrangements and the right story. And all of those things come together in the film.
The Stairway to Paradise number is the only show number in the piece. Minnelli designed this because this is what he did in so many reviews on Broadway in the 30s.
I'll build a stairway to paradise with a new step every day.
Georges Guettari really had this incredible tenor voice. He wasn't the smartest man that ever lived, but he was very sweet and very accommodating and very friendly.
Gene did say, boy, I spent more time teaching him how to walk than on any other thing I did, any other bit of rehearsal. Gene was very big on how you can gracefully walk up and down stairs.
I've got the blues, it's so fair.
One of the biggest problems they had was the heat of the lights, and so these showgirls in these big headdresses were all getting dizzy and passing out with the heat, and so they had a bit of a problem.
Adam, for this you win a scholarship? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Oscar Levant knew the music of the Gershwins inside and out. The problem was that they could not get him to decide what number to perform in the movie. He would say, okay, I'm going to do this, and then they'd set on that. And the next week he'd say, oh, no, I'm going to do this. Finally, he did decide on the Concerto in F.
Minnelli loved to explore character. He would have them daydream, have fantasies. Often they became the reasons for musical sequences in his films. Look at Adam's Cook projection. I mean, it's beautifully integrated because it's what he aspires to. It's how he sees his ideal world.
Gene said that the whole piece with the orchestra was absolutely Oscar's idea.
Having him play all the parts is funny, and I guess they felt that would sell it. But when you watch it, what really sells it is the way Minnelli shoots him and the fascination of watching his hands on the keyboard.
Minnelli here, not even forsaking the whole business of painting and Paris, did it all in this yellow-orange that we associate with Dufay, the painter, a color that Dufay was very passionate about. So here you never even lose the sense of painting and impressionism, even in this sequence.
And it does have a little cameo appearance by Adolph Green conducting, because he liked Oscar Levant and loved the music of George Gershwin and was brought in for one day to conduct the orchestra.
This time it's really love, tra-la-la-la.
What makes the Gene Kelly character so odd is that he's not a very good painter. He just does imitation utrillos. But he is a great dancer, and nobody seems to notice that. I mean, that's the sort of the inside joke of the film, that he's being primed for the wrong career.
The real thing that you notice about Tra-La-La, I think, is how difficult it was to shoot and execute. It's in a very small space, and it's very strenuous dancing. They did multiple takes, and if something is off, if they've pulled back too quickly or not quickly enough, or Gene's foot is off of the mark, or it all had to be redone.
Gene was the final answer on most of the music that we recorded. After we made a take, well, he danced to it right there in front of us. No, this should be faster, a little faster. No, let's make a drum roll here. Let's put a brass chord here, something like that.
it! Hum it! Strum it! Drum it! Sing it! Sing it! Drum it!
Wonderful performer, and it respected us too.
For Leslie Caron, no dance number was more challenging or stressful than the one that would introduce her to moviegoers around the world, Embraceable You. But to Caron's surprise, the number also sparked a battle with production code censors.
Censorship was dominating Hollywood in the 50s. They really sent people to come and look at rehearsals and look at the filming and say this is too sexy, this is not acceptable.
She seems to be a lusty young lady.
And after I did my chair number, I was told it was too sexy and I had to do it again.
If you compare that to the one where she's to be the more studious girl, Jean always said that the one where she's studious is far sexier than the one where she's attempting to be the sexy girl.
Yes, that was entirely taken from my warm-up exercises, except I didn't warm up with a book. I was extremely supple, and doing a split was absolutely nothing for me.
The thing that Jean was trying to do in dance on film was to have the performers play a role. He wanted to play a GI in Paris.
It's very clear our love is here to stay.
And if you look at the Our Love Is Here to Stay number, he's acting and she's acting. It's a love scene.
And we knew we were doing something lovely. But that said, you know, the water would become very stagnant. It smelt moldy. But once the lights were on, once you had the sound, and Jean was singing and we were dancing, then it was a magic moment. It was very tender and a moment of great closeness.
One of the numbers that Jean did was cut from American in Paris, and unfortunately it just turned out to be Jean's favorite number, and it was called I've Got a Crush on You. The ballads would get cut. They would be too long and slow the picture down, and Jean said of I've Got a Crush on You, he said, I guess I just said I love you once.
Throughout production, the Freed unit had never been more inspired or unified. But after a month of shooting, one creative struggle remained. The filmmakers had yet to decide what to do for the movie's climactic ballet, a sequence they knew would be the most important in the picture.
It was never the intention at the outset that this film was going to end with An American in Paris as a ballet. When the original script was prepared, the movie was going to end with a ballet shot in Paris called Somebody Loves Me, one of the songs that George and Ira Gershwin wrote.
Then one day Jean said that Arthur Freed came to them and said, no, I got the whole American in Paris piece for the ballet. And they said, ugh, you know, it's 17.5 minutes. And they said, where are we going to put that? And about a week later, Freed came back to them and said, it goes at the end of the picture.
Quite a ways along in the picture. They hadn't figured out what to do with the ballet. They were really desperate. They were, oh goodness, it's coming at us. What are we going to do? Well, I got chicken pox. They were so grateful to me for getting sick.
So for 3 days we couldn't shoot anything. Well, it was a lifesaver for us because Gene Kelly and Irene Sheriff and myself locked up in my office, and in 3 days we knocked out the whole idea of the ballet.
The brilliant idea was, of course, the decors with the inspiration from all the great painters, the Impressionist painters.
Kelly, Minnelli, and designer Irene Sheriff created a 7-page libretto outlining the story, decor, and psychology of the ballet. The ambitious result blended classical and American dance with sets and costumes inspired by the art of Dufy, Renoir, Utrillo, Rousseau, Van Gogh, and Toulouse-Lautrec.
It is this whole projection of the protagonist, of what he wants to achieve in his life. Lise has just left him for Andree. Where is that going to go in his life? And so naturally, it's a traumatic moment. And as with all traumatic moments that we have, we go inside of ourselves.
I came to Paris to study and to paint, because Utrillo did, and Lautrec did, and Rouault did. I loved what they created, and I thought something would happen to me, too.
Around the studio, everyone thought they were crazy. They thought, this cannot work. You cannot stop a film, have an enormous ballet right at the end. People thought it was absolutely impossible to do.
Irving Berlin was visiting, and the sets were being built. Arthur Freed and Gene Kelly and myself went with Berlin and showed him all the sets. And finally he said, do I understand that you boys are planning on ending this picture with a ballet, 20 minutes, no dialogue after that? We said, yes. And he said, well, I hope you know what you're doing, you know. Well, that's all we needed, because our hearts were in our mouth. It was very daring in those days to do it.
This is a production number to end all production numbers. Well, they had ballets before, but nothing quite like this. Its swirl of color and light took the breath away.
At that time, America didn't have all the regional companies that it has now. And here you could see an entire ballet for the price of a movie ticket.
The first part was reminiscent of the style of a painter like Dufay, and they placed it in a set that Dufay actually painted, the Place de la Cour.
In the score of An American in Paris, Gershwin came to Paris and was horrified at the sound of all the honks. And it's in the music, and Gene used it as a policeman, the traffic, the honks.
The cinematographer for the ballet segment was a man by the name of John Alton, and Gene thought it was a terrific choice because the title of his book was Painting with Light, and it was critical to create that kind of a sense in this impressionistic segment.
A person in my position should be artistic. They should be able to paint themselves, you know. Because actually what a man in my position does is painting. Minnelli was wonderful to work with. We didn't have to talk. We sat down before the picture, we prepared. I knew just what he wants.
John Alton had done a lot of noir work, too. He knew how to display black against white. Alton had never worked in color before, so he was going to be experimental. And what he did, the low-key lighting, the underlighting, it's quite wonderful. And John Alton made the light move. And then we have a celebration of Utrillo at Street in Montmartre, where the protagonist, our Jerry, meets up with the XGIs. And here again, working his World War II experience afterwards in Paris. And then they take him to this Place de la Bastille, where there is a July 4th celebration going on. And here we begin all Rousseau. And the dance style changes.
Some of the dances were in Ballet Russe. So when we found out we had to do 16 fouettes on point, didn't faze anybody. Kelly was enthusiastic and fun, and he looked as if he could hardly wait to get out there and dance, and he had this wonderful grin. You wanted to be part of what he saw and what he wanted.
That was hard work. I remember having a tough time with the music then. I must have been still ill. I had a very hard time. I'm right a little under the tempo. It really was very difficult for me to keep up.
The foreign censors objected to parts of the ballet around the fountain because what Gene was choreographing was essentially lovemaking.
That solo is an easy solo to play, really, you know. I played it very straight the first time, but Gene was the guy in control, so Gene said, no, make it sexy and sensuous. So I played what I thought was sensuous and sexy. Not burlesque, you know, but a sense of sexiness to it, and that was my interpretation of being sexy. But Gene was overjoyed, very happy, a wonderful guy, and he came back and literally said, thank you so much, Juan, thank you so much, and kissed me in the cheek, thank you. You made the whole scene happen.
Irene Sheriff at one point said that she used 25 different shades of yellow in the Van Gogh section to create this sense. It's a spectacular array, a spectacular palette.
The Toulouse-Lautrec was the most fun, and I think Gene loved that the best.
And of course, Kelly becomes the chocolat.
Kelly just finds exactly the arm and leg thing to go along with those tremolos written into the piece. It's so marvelous.
Gene did smile. He said he got a lot of fan mail over that costume. And also, he said that in the theaters, people would just cheer when Chocolat is on.
There's no doubt Gene was a remarkable choreographer for the movies. He was the one who always placed the camera during numbers, and he had all that inspired by the music, inspired by the set and the particular talent of the painter who inspired the set.
Gene changed the face of dance. He brought it that American vigor and absolutely changed the face of dance.
When the film was over, there was a sneak preview, and I was invited to come. When the film was over and we came out on the sidewalk, Gene said, well, Lester, how do you feel? I said, oh, Gene, I think I caught the flu. I've got this headache and sore throat. And he said, honey, you don't have the flu. You've just seen yourself on the screen for the first time.
Released in the fall of 1951, An American in Paris was a box office triumph. Audiences and critics hailed Leslie Caron as an exciting new screen presence. But although its cast and its music won raves, reviews were mixed for the movie's script. And in a year dominated by strong dramas, including A Streetcar Named Desire, A Place in the Sun, and Quo Vadis, few considered Paris a major contender at the Academy Awards. But March 20th, 1952, was no ordinary Oscar night. Nominated for 8 Academy Awards, An American in Paris swept the ceremony with 6 wins. For art direction, cinematography, costume design, music, story and screenplay, and most remarkably, Best Picture.
And thank you to my brilliant associates who made this possible.
In addition, Arthur Freed was presented with a special award, the Irving Thalberg Award, and Gene received a special award for his contribution to the art of choreography and directing and performing. Gene, I think, treasured it.
The message was clear. The work of Arthur Freed and his collaborators was more than commercial product. It was art. An American in Paris marked the beginning of a bold new era of invention within the Freed unit. And in some ways, the film's accomplishments and subtleties have yet to be fully appreciated.
Looking at the film today and getting past the prejudice, the favorable prejudice that we bring to a musical, which is that it's all light and happy, we're going to hear wonderful songs and see great dancing, it is a dark film. It's a dark film in the way a lot of Minnelli's films are dark, because the character relationships aren't really resolved. They only seem to be. The French guy ends up completely by himself. He's got one ticket to America now. Nina Foch, we don't know what's become of her. The last line, I think, is,
I think I need some champagne.
boy, does she. And then even Kelly and Caron, when they walk off, it reminds me of The Graduate. You know, he gets her, but what has he got? They don't know each other. So there is a kind of brittleness to these relationships.
Gene said it was ahead of its time. And you have to realize how truly revolutionary it was. I think it was galvanizing for all of them, nervous-making, and I think it was also something they could take great pride in.
C'est formidable! C'est magnifique! Ah, it's wonderful! It's marvelous! She should care for me.
When people say, were you in a movie, and I say American in Paris, that sets the level. There you have cachet. There people know you, and everything else fades into the back.
With that group, you could do no wrong. Everything was top quality. Everything was top talent, respect for each other. There was nobody giving orders. It was a sauce that we all made together.
The people at MGM knew that they were part of something really special. And they work together with enormous joy, which I believe is the trick. If you bring joy to your work, the kind of joy they did, you're bound to have success.
Elegance, what I want, quelque chose from head to toes, wonderful, marvelous, that she should care.